Hi there, this is Andrew Brody with Yokogawa's Network Solutions Group. Today I'd like to give you a presentation on the MW100, also known as the DAQMaster. It is a web-based data acquisition system that features best-in-class noise rejection up to 3700 volts RMS for 1 minute with a wide variety of input and output modules, including universal input modules. It offers tabletop or rack mounting possibilities with vibration and shock engineering for mobile installations. It supports up to 2 gigabytes of compact flash storage and has a good operating range of -20 Celsius to +60 Celsius. It also offers built-in Ethernet and optional RS-232 or 485 serial interfaces. Locally, it can have up to 60 channels, and up to 300 remote points can be brought in via communications. Sample times can be as fast as 10 milliseconds for up to 10 channels, and we can also do 1 second for all 360 channels. So what we're seeing here up on my screen is the actual interface for the MW100 unit. To get that, you just need to open up Internet Explorer and go and type in the IP address of the unit that you wish to see. Once we do this, you can see the default interface. And it's broken into 3 sections here. Monitor, this is for looking at real-time information. Settings, this is for configuring the unit. And status, this is for turning the system on, essentially starting measurement, starting math, starting recording here. So if we take a quick look at this, I'll give you a review of what these are. Single versus dual screen, this is essentially looking at one group of points versus 2 groups of points at the same time. Data view allows you to see stuff like alarm summary, manual snapshots, reports should you have purchased the reporting option. It has both numerical and graphical reports. We also have light monitor here. This is a low bandwidth monitoring option for looking at real-time data. If I go over to the settings here, channel settings, this is where you configure points and alarms as well as the math channels, which are kind of like virtual channels for doing calculations, totalization, stuff like that. We also have system settings. This is more for configuring the operational settings of the units, like how fast we're gonna record, how fast we're gonna do the math, how fast we're gonna sample the channels. And then we have stuff like display settings. That's how you're going to group the channels together, how you're going to name them, everything to do with the real-time presentation of the data. Communication settings, this is where we set up stuff like email, Modbus communications, network time synchronization, FTP, and items like that. And setting list here, this gives you a complete textual summary of all the settings that are in the unit. So if we go down here to status, this essentially allows where I can do stuff like start and stop my measurement, start and stop, reset and clear my math, and start and stop recording. Okay, and when I'm ready to go ahead and execute those, I just hit apply. So anyways, let's get started here, and I'm going to start out with system setting. Once I pick system setting, you're going to see all types of links here. I'm not going to cover all of them, as is with most of the menu items throughout this demonstration. I'm going to cover the main ones that are going to be of importance to you. So I'm going to click here on system information. This here is going to show you your serial number. It's going to show you what options this unit was purchased with. In this case, it has math, reports, it ships with, this is pretty standard on everything, degrees Fahrenheit, and this one also had the 422, 485 interface with daylight savings time. It also tells you the version of firmware that you've got installed here, and if you've done a firmware upgrade, these here should both read about the same. It also tells you how much room you have free on your compact flash, as well as allows you to execute a format of the compact flash. If I move up here, the next I'm going to take a look at is module information. When you first build a unit, it's going to automatically detect what modules you have attached, but they may not show up as configured. In order to do that, you just hit reconstruct and it should move stuff over here. So whenever you add a new module or rebuild a unit, it's a good idea to come in here and reconstruct the unit. Okay, moving right along here. The next is measurement settings. Within the MW100, you can have up to 3 different measurement intervals. Each one of these 3 different intervals can be applied to each individual module. In this case, I only have one measurement module. but I could pick from one of the 3 intervals that I set up here. In this case, I've only got 1 interval set up, but I could pick other ones. And you can see it goes from as low as 10 milliseconds all the way to 60 milliseconds. If I go back up here, the next one I'm going to take a look at is math settings. Right here, if we take a look here, it's important to know that of those 3 intervals that we set up in the prior, this is where I kind of pick how fast the math's going to operate. So by picking interval 1, I'll be operating my math at 1 second, which we set on the previous screen. The fastest math can operate is at 100 milliseconds. If we take a look down here, these are all the type of error condition type settings that we can do for math, measurement, t-logs, and other types of math computations. The next important setting is recording settings. If we take a look here, we can see the different types of recording we can do. We can do direct or trigger. You can think of direct as just kind of recording on a time basis. So record one file for maybe 1 hour or all the way to 31 days. Under direct, you can do a single file. You can fill up the compact flash and then stop, or you can rotate. And this basically just kicks out the oldest file to make room for a new file. So you constantly have, say, the latest 2 gigs worth of data on that card. Under recording interval, this is essentially a ratio of your measurement samples to your recording. So that would be 1 to 1, and this would be 10 to 1. So for every 10 samples, we record 1 point. All right. And then the other mode of recording we have is something called trigger. And trigger allows you to create some type of event that then records data. And you can say how long you want the data length to be should that happen, and what your pre-trigger is, essentially how much of the data comes before the event, how much comes after the event. Okay, so that's some of the stuff we have there. We also have an alarm here for your compact flash. Should it be getting full, you can essentially say the alarm, and then you can have the little message for the alarm right here. All right, and then taking a look here, the other important one we have down here is event action. You can have various events and actions set up. So for example, here's all the events you can have, like digital inputs, alarms, memories, relays, stuff like that, the user key. You can pick what channels if you're doing some type of alarm. You can pick edge or level. Edge is essentially just when something happens, and level is essentially while that event is happening. Okay, and then these are the different types of actions that you can do. Everything from start and stop recording to start, stop, and reset math or math groups, to execute a trigger, to do some of these other things here. Okay, and these triggers here are where you do that trigger-based recording that I showed you earlier. Moving back to the top here, another important here is report settings. If we take a look at here, this is where we can set up, if you've purchased the report option, how to do reports. So essentially when the reports are going to be done. And then over here is all the channels, how you're going to sum them up, and what their units are. All right. And then the last thing I'm going to cover under here is other settings. This is a real important one to know. This setting right here sets the display on the front of the MW100, so it allows you to essentially give it a number up there. So say you have 10 of these in a rack, you could have the first one is 01 and the last one is 10. And then another important thing here with dealing with any Yokogawa recorder is to make sure you set degrees Celsius or degrees Fahrenheit right at the start, because that has a big bearing on how we process RTDs and thermocouples. So that pretty much covers the setting tab. I'm going to go back to the top here, and I'm going to move over to the channel settings. And under channel settings, the first one I'm going to hit is the AIDI channel setting. And what we have here is I've got a 4-channel universal input module installed, and you can truly see how universal it is. I can do everything from volts, all those voltage ranges. I can do thermocouples, all those types of thermocouples. I can do something like an RTD, all those different types of RTDs, including some real oddball ones. I can do a digital input, level or contact. I can do junction compensated thermocouples. All right. Or I can just go ahead and skip that channel altogether. And each one of these can be individually configured, and if I had multiple modules in here, I could individually configure all those modules. So I'm going to go back to the top now. The next one I'm going to take a look at is math channels. These math channels, you get 60 of them that you can actually do some major math on. You get 60 channels by 120 characters, and this includes all your basics like plus, minus, divide, multiply. What we're looking at here, it's a little cryptic, but you can also do if then else statements. You can refer to this K3 as an actual math constant. You can have math channels refer to themselves. I'm doing a little demonstration here, so I'm doing a bunch of kind of simulated flow runs and stuff like that, just using the math for purposes of this demonstration. But I can actually take one math channel and add it to another math channel for stuff like totals. I've also got time-based functions like t-log average and t-log sum to give me a time-based average or a time-based summation of points. So these math channels can be very powerful. You can even do limited control with them if you'd like. Moving next here is math constants. You get 60 math constants that you can use within your calculations. A standard math calculation cannot have straight numerical numbers. Like 1 plus 2 would actually be I/O channel 1 plus I/O channel 2. So if you wanted to actually do numerical 1 plus 2, you'd have to put in 1 into K1, 2 into K2, and then add K1 and K2. So there's just some little intricacies using here, but these math constants can be very handy when doing your math channel settings. Next I'm looking at here is recording channel setting, and right here I can set exactly which channels I want to record, including my math channels. Okay. Next is alarm settings, and we have these both for the inputs and for the math channels. You get up to 4 alarms per channel. So for example, for I/O channel 1, I can set a high, low, rate low, time delay high, time delay low, put in the value. I can put in a hysteresis, which is percent of scale. And if I have relays, I can output to the relays here by just picking output and then typing in the relay number that I'd want to output to. If I'm doing anything special like burnout junction compensation settings, I can go ahead and set that right here. It's a good idea to set all these when you're configuring a system. And the last thing I'll hit on while I'm here is rolling averages. If we take a look at any of the math points, I can do a rolling average on any of those math points. And I can go in here, turn it on. I could say what interval, and I could say how many samples. And that's going to wrap it up for my quick coverage of channel settings. The next I'm going to take a look at is display settings here. Under channel tag setting, this is where I can name all the tags. Since it's a pure simulation I'm doing here, the only thing I've really named is some of my math channels. If I go back here, I can also set the color if I wanted to of each one of those points. Here I can set predetermined messages that I can later insert into the trend. Over here is where I group my channels. So you can see I've grouped some of the channels here. So I use a dash for a span of points, so math channels A5 through A8. And I use a period to separate individual points, so like A21 period A22. And then once again you can see another span here and another span there. And then the last under display settings, I'm going to take a look at other settings here. And this is just where, when I'm displaying stuff in real time, I can choose tag name or channel number. And that wraps it up for display settings. The next I'd like to take a look at is communication settings. This is where you can set all the communications. So user settings, this is where you set up security. This is where you can put in usernames, passwords, and whether you're going to use security by clicking enable up here. The next is serial communication settings. This here is if you're doing any serial communications, including Modbus master, Modbus slave type communications. IP address setting, this is where you can put in the IP address. So there's 2 ways to set the IP address. One is with some built-in software that you can install on your PC that will automatically find MW100s on your network and allow you to set them through there. If you set them through that software, you do not need to reboot the MW100. If you set it through here, you can put in a new IP address here, but that IP address won't actually take effect until you restart the unit. Let's see, moving right along here, this is where you'd set up your Modbus communications, your Modbus This is serial type communications, and this is Ethernet communications. Just taking a real quick look here, I'd enable it. I'd set what IP addresses of the units I'm communicating to, as well as their unit number. And then here is where I'd actually do the communication. So doing something like a read from server 1 that we set up on the previous screen, what Modbus register, what data type, and what communication channel I'm going to read it into. If I wanted to read in 10 in a block, I'd just go something like this and read in 10 integer type 16s starting at 30,001. Once I have these communication channels, I can then record them by dropping them into a math channel. You can only record I/O channels or math channels. So moving right along here, this is some of the other stuff that you can set up. FTP if you want to do automatic file transfers, emails if you want to do email alerts, and network time synchronization if you want to do that with SNTP. So going back to the top here, I'm going to take a quick look at some of the stuff here. I've already got everything started up. So I'm going to go here and hit single screen. This is going to show me my real-time displays. The only thing that you need installed to see your real-time displays is Internet Explorer, and then you just seen that quick, the Java Virtual Machine, which is a free download from www.java.com. And once it connects up here, we're going to see the real-time data coming in. So we can see down here is some of the calculations that I had going on. I've got a control panel up here where I can start math, start recording, or stop recording since I'm already recording. I can pause the screen if I wanted to do a snapshot. I could acknowledge an alarm if I was in an alarm condition. I could reset or clear my math, reset timers if I had any running. I can move over here. I can move to something like a digital display, and I can change the background to white. So as soon as this updates, we'll see kind of like a digital trend or a trend happening on the screen here. Once that trend's happening on the screen, you can see it's kind of going across right there. I can go ahead and stack the trend, so I can give each one its own individual scale if I wanted to. I could also do something like this and go ahead and type in a message here, or pick from one of the 5 preset messages that we set up under display settings and go ahead and inject that into it. So we'll see here that I've just injected that, which you can later find when you're taking a look at the data file. If I wanted to see everything just in a purely digital manner, I could click here, go ahead and see everything in a digital manner. And it'll take a second or two to show up. I could also see it in bar graph mode or kind of an old school meter type mode here. And over here, this is where I can pick from one of 18 groups of channels that I've got set up. So say I wanted to take a look at student parking and see what's going on there. I can see the 2 channels that I've got configured under student parking. They'll take a second to update, but once they do, you'll see the digital value of those 2. All right, so that pretty much covers the real-time display there. Let's take a look into some of the other stuff that we've got going on here. I can do manual sample by clicking on this. I'll take a quick manual sample into a manual sample file. All right, if I wanted to do it again, I could click on a manual sample again and I'll have that. The other thing that I've got going on here is I have something called data view. Now this gives me a few things that I can look at. Stuff like an alarm summary, manual sample, report digital, or report graph. What we're looking at right now is the report graph. And I've got various things that I could essentially look at across here. Auto scale. All right. And I could also break it down by channel, file. I could also move to a purely digital report. It'll take a second to pull this up, but once we do this, I can kind of see all those as well. I can also take a look at the data I've manually sampled. So there's that manual sample I took. And I can also see my alarm summary. And you can see everything's time and date stamped there and tells what type of alarm I had going on. So, once I've done that, I can essentially close that out. I'm going to go back to the top here. And the last thing I'm going to cover here is the setting list on the front. This gives you a full layout text-wise of all your settings in your unit. Go back to the top. And I also have light monitor here, which gives you a low bandwidth suitable for use with cell modems for communicating with the MW, and you can see it. You can set your update rate, you can change your font size, you can change what group you're looking at, and you can do some of the basic control panel type things like pause it, start, stop recording. Now what I'd also like to show you here is custom web page capability of the unit. So custom web pages can be put together using any of the items that you've seen on those real-time displays that we just finished looking at. And here's one I've happened to build up on here. So I've added a custom graphic. I've added some hotspots that I can click on to get further data. And what we're actually going to see is some of that. This is all simulated. I'm not actually hooked up to this campus, but you can see some of the totals all brought to the front here. These are just the digital displays that we have from a real-time display dropped on the screen. I can then click on one of the specific sites, take a look at what's going on there. It's going to bring in some of these digital values here. I've also got another hotspot down here that I can click on. That's going to return me to the campus image. And now I can go click on something else like the library and see what's going on at the library. And I can see digital displays that'll shortly fill in here in real time. Okay. And there they are. They're updating away. So that covers the real-time and the custom web page option on the MW100. So I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to show you quickly how we can actually get to the data that's been recorded on it for reviewing historical purposes. So I'm going to close that out. And then the quickest way to get to the data on one of your systems is just open up My Computer or Windows Explorer, not Internet Explorer, but like the thing that you actually use to browse your hard drive. And you just type in ftp:// the IP address of the unit you're looking at. And what you're now seeing here is this is the compact flash on the actual MW100. So if I go to config here, this is the configuration file that I'm looking at, and I can literally drag and drop that to my desktop here. So that's how easy it is to transfer files. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that now that I've transferred it. So that's the configuration. I can do the same for data files. So I can go into one of these data directories here and grab out whatever data file I want to see. If I want to see it by time and date stamp, I can kind of go ahead and look at it like that. All right, so I can literally drag and drop some of those to the desktop and go ahead and view them. Now I've already done that to save a little time, but I could do the same for, those are the real-time kind of recordings of data. Here's my manual samples, here's my report files, here's all the stuff for my custom web page that I put together. Just all I used was front page to build up that. So I'm going to close out that, and I'm going to take a look at some of the data files that I have here. So I'm going to pull this up. Here's some of the data files that we have right here. There's my configuration, there's my manual sample file, here's my report file, here's my display data file. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up the free viewing software that comes with the actual recorder. So I'm going to go over here, MW100, I'm going to open up its viewer. And once that viewer is opened up, I can just go ahead and drop this onto the viewer and take a look at the actual data. Okay, if I want to take a look at the report file, I can drop the report file on there. If I want to take a look at the manual sample, I can drop the manual sample file on there. So we can go ahead and see all these, right? So if I want to see it that way in a trend, I can see it in a trend. If I want to see it in more a digital manner, I can see it in a digital manner. Time and date stamp for everything. These are the 4 alarms that you can set up per channel. By default, they'll just be green, but down here you can see when they go into alarm, they go red. If I want to go ahead and convert this to Excel so I can use it in a spreadsheet, I can go ahead and do that. So that pretty much covers the MW100, its data viewer, how to configure the unit. And the last thing I'd like to do, just to wrap things up here, is give you kind of a quick summary. And the summary is, the MW100 features a web-based configuration with real-time data viewing. It has universal input capabilities, and each channel is individually configured. I can record based on time or events with the MW100. I can do robust alarms and enunciations using the logging system. I've got powerful virtual channels and math channels for doing computations, totalizations. The MW100 supports a wide variety of protocols. We've seen Modbus, but also if you have, like, say, Allen Bradley based PLCs or other devices that support Ethernet IP, the MW100 supports Ethernet IP. For people doing electrical work, we have MW100s that support DNP3 communications. For people doing wellheads, we have WITS communications as well. We support email, FTP, network time synchronization. The MW100 can also be used to take manual samples, generate reports. As you've seen, it can do custom web pages. It comes in a Class 1 Div 2 variant for some explosive environments. And the MW100 also supports steam, saturated and superheated, and natural gas calculations like AGA 3 and 8.